Last week, crews were drilling through the walls, floors, and courtyard in search of Escobar's hidden treasures beneath Pablo Escobar's luxurious mansions. There were vaults completely isolated from the world, specifically constructed to protect more than just mere financial assets. For decades, they were whispered about, lost between rumors and fear. So today, I've got some new news to share. They actually found something quite remarkable. Now, one of them has just finally been opened. Inside, investigators uncovered weapons, notebooks, records, and evidence of a hidden empire. Come along with us as we enter Escobar's hidden underground vault. And don't forget to click that notification bell, my friend, for all our upcoming episodes. Pablo Escobar's vast criminal empire from unimaginable wealth. Pablo Escobar's criminal empire didn't start with wealth or influence, but with petty crimes on the streets of Medellin. As a teenager, he discovered that desperation and opportunity could be turned into profit. He used to steal tombstones from cemeteries, meticulously remove the names using industrial sanding tools, and resell them to completely unaware buyers. He very rapidly moved on to car theft, extortion, and gang violence. The crimes escalated with terrifying efficiency. By the time the early 1970s rolled around, he was actively orchestrating high-profile kidnappings for ransom, getting rid of the victims even after the ransom was paid. Way back in the year 1971, when businessman Diego Echevarria was kidnapped and executed, Escobar's group walked away with $50,000 and a reputation for cruelty that quickly spread throughout Colombia. This ruthless ambition collided with opportunity when Escobar discovered cocaine. Well, by the time we reached the year 1976, the roots of smuggling were taken hold, and Escobar fully recognized the immense future potential of this burgeoning illegal trade. That same year, he was eventually apprehended while transporting 39 kilograms of cocaine hidden deep within a car's chassis frame. But the sudden arrest only deeply reinforced his philosophy. Money can completely eliminate problems, and violence can erase the people who stand in the way. He used his wealth to bribe his way back out of prison. The officer who arrested him was tragically killed not long after that. From that point onwards, plata or blumo, meaning silver or lead, take the bribe or face the bullet. Bribery bought him influence. Escobar poured money into the Colombian political arena, distributing it to both the conservative and the liberal political parties to ensure they had secured loyal allies for themselves. Then, in the month of April 1978, he attended a meeting with other smugglers at a rural farm, a significant event that marked the true birth of the notorious Medellin cartel. Within months, their joint operations were shipping an estimated total of 19,000 individual kilograms of cocaine to the United States. The demand was insatiable, and Escobar possessed the strategic vision to take full advantage of it on an unprecedented scale. Expansion came quickly. Alongside his partner Carlos Lehrer, Escobar transformed the island of Norman's Key in the Bahamas into a major smuggling fortress and a dock for incoming shipments and massive temperature-controlled storage facilities to store the cocaine until it was ready to saturate the entire United States market. The profits from this operation alone far exceeded absolutely anything Escobar had ever imagined. With vast amounts of cash streaming in faster than it could ever be counted, Escobar began to reshape his world. In Antioquia, he built Hacienda Nápoles, a ranch spanning 7,000 acres, embodying both luxury and menace at the same time. The estate featured a colonial-style mansion and artificial lakes, a massive private zoo filled with majestic giraffes, giant elephants, and heavy hippos, and even several life-size dinosaur statues overlooking the vast grounds. For Escobar, it wasn't just a house, it was a stage to showcase his dominance. As his vast empire continued to grow, he became a philanthropic patron, funding housing projects, schools, hospitals, parks, and soccer fields. For many, he eventually came to be known as a widely celebrated Robin Hood, the criminal who generously provided for the community even as he ruled it with fear. His public image had become influential and strong enough to get him into the world of politics. In 1982, he successfully entered the National Congress as an alternate representative for the Liberal Party, and his official passport finally allowed him to travel freely across borders. Publicly, he maintained the claim that his substantial personal fortune was originally derived from a teenage bicycle rental business. Secretly, it was billions of dollars. Justice Minister Rodrigo Lara Bonilla launched an investigation into his past. Then, Liberal Party leader Luis Carlos Galan officially expelled him from the party. By January 1984, Pablo Escobar officially withdrew from the world of politics, and just 3 months later, Justice Minister Lara Bonilla was brutally assassinated. The hit effectively silenced the vocal critic, but it also further reinforced Escobar's growing image as a ruthless man who was fully willing to eliminate anyone who dared to oppose him. His battle against the Colombian judiciary quickly escalated. Judges were bribed, threatened, or executed. Escobar demanded one condition in exchange for surrender: not to be extradited to the United States. When that was refused, he funded Los Extraditables, a network dedicated to fighting extradition with bombs and bullets. Back in November 1985, a group of heavily armed men violently stormed the Palace of Justice, killing more than half of the presiding judges of the country's highest Supreme Court. Although Escobar's direct involvement was never proven, the country's highest Supreme Court. Dark suspicions continued to cling to him. The Colombian Supreme Court officially declared the extradition treaty legally invalid, but the victory was ultimately short-lived. The following president reinstated the agreement with Washington. Escobar responded by attacking the policy itself. On the 18th of August, 1989, Luis Carlos Galan was assassinated, the very leader who had expelled him by his orders. A few weeks later, Escobar orchestrated the bombing of Avianca Flight 203 in an attempt to assassinate Galan's successor, Cesar Gaviria. Gaviria was not on the plane, but every single one of the 107 passengers tragically lost their lives, among whom were 2 Americans. The attack was a decisive turning point. The deaths of 2 Americans brought Washington into a direct war with Escobar. By the late 1980s, his empire had reached unprecedented and unimaginable heights. The Medellin cartel was supplying a staggering 80% of the entire world's market. More than 15 tons were entering the United States on a daily basis. They were delivered by vast fleets of planes, ships, and even submarines. But with this crown came a massive fortune on a scale the world had seldom, if ever, witnessed in history. At the height of his power, Escobar's cartel was making an estimated $420 million a week. His personal wealth soared to between $30 and $60 billion, which is equivalent to about $80 billion today. It was way back in 1987. Forbes magazine officially recognized him as being one of the richest men alive, estimating his total net worth at approximately $3 billion, and he successfully maintained his position on the billionaire list for 7 consecutive years. That wealth revealed itself in real estate, luxuries, and displays of power. Hacienda Nápoles remained the crown jewel of his empire, a peculiar combination of high-end real estate and a dreamlike amusement park. In Medellin, Escobar built the Monaco Building. It is a massive 8-story fortress that is owned by his family. It is fully equipped with its own swimming pools, tennis courts, and even an emergency room. In Guatemala, La Manuela built a palace on the banks of a lake, which he named after his daughter, designed for lavish parties and family retreats. In the Caribbean, he took over a private corner on Isla Grande, where a palace with fortified windows was built. His massive wealth extended far beyond just real estate. Escobar was also deeply obsessed with collecting rare cars. For instance, he owned a classic Porsche 911 Carrera 3.0 RSR. It was previously driven by Formula One champion Emerson Fittipaldi. There is also a classic vintage Cadillac V8 Town sedan, which was meticulously styled after the Al Capone era, and one of the cartel's very first luxury vehicles, a vintage blue Wartburg 311. His extensive fleet also included powerful Toyota Land Cruisers, nicknamed Narco Yodas, used for cartel operations, alongside rare Porsche 356e models and a vintage Harley-Davidson that once belonged to the legendary Frank Sinatra, and even a jet ski that appeared in a James Bond film, the movie titled The Spy Who Loved Me. They were later completely destroyed in car bombings or confiscated and seized by the authorities. Their burned-out shells were displayed at Hacienda Nápoles as strange remnants of his showmanship. Escobar's financial power was immense, enough to pay off Colombia's entire national debt, which amounted to $10 billion, in exchange for a guarantee that he wouldn't be extradited to the United States. This offer demonstrated both the truly staggering and immense depth of his wealth and the profound sense of desperation of a man who knew that his vast fortune by itself could no longer protect him from the reach of justice. Escobar's billions of dollars poured in at such an unbelievably massive rate that it became a logistical nightmare. The money was coming in so fast that it simply could not be spent, laundered, or stored in banks. Instead, the cash was crammed into warehouses, hidden behind walls, buried in fields, or locked away in underground vaults. His brother Robento, the cartel, decounted it. They later actually admitted that nearly 10% of all the physical cash they had stored, which was more than $2 billion every year, was lost to hungry rats, mold, and extensive water damage. The solutions bordered on the ridiculous. The cartel spent approximately $2,500 every single month just on rubber bands, simply to keep those massive stacks of bundles of U.S. currency together. On one occasion, while he was in hiding, Pablo Escobar once famously burned $2 million in cold, hard cash just to keep his young daughter warm during a freezing night. Money became so abundant that it was treated like fuel, firewood, or even a rag. The cartel's secret safe houses doubled as massive vaults. Behind thick concrete walls, enormous fortunes were stacked from the floor to the ceiling. Remote farms across the region of Antioquia hid many sealed barrels of cold, hard cash, many of which remained buried and undiscovered even decades later. Some of the hideouts shared space with weapons, records, and evidence of just how far the cartel's influence reached. Rumors spread about tunnels beneath the properties, torture rooms disguised as storage spaces, and escape routes safeguarded behind hidden doors. It really didn't matter at all whether each and every rumor was true. The legend of Escobar's hidden fortune became bigger than the man himself. Escobar's paranoia intensified his constant need for absolute secrecy. He didn't trust any bank or accountant, and only trusted a very small select group of family members. Money was physically buried deep underground, never officially recorded in ledgers. All records were kept in secret notebooks. Every safe was both a guarantee of survival and a symbol of fear at the same time. A sign that wealth means nothing if you can't protect it from rivals, the government, or betrayal. Despite all his power, Escobar simply couldn't escape the inevitable downfall of his criminal empire. When Pablo Escobar was finally shot, Colombia erupted in relief. But even as the authorities rejoiced over his death, what exactly happened to the billions of dollars in fortune Escobar had carefully stashed away? The discovery of secret vaults. Pablo Escobar's vast empire began to reveal its complex, hidden layers long before his ultimate demise. In the early 1980s, whispers and rumors started to circulate about secret cash stashes scattered across Colombia and beyond. Escobar himself further intensified the mystery when he purchased a lavish pink mansion on North Bay Road in Miami Beach. This expansive waterfront property, featuring 4 spacious bedrooms and direct access to the waters of Biscayne Bay, became quite notorious among the local residents, who strongly suspected it was being used as a secret cartel hideout and storage site. By the mid-1980s, United States federal authorities seized the massive mansion, convinced that it concealed hidden vaults within its walls and foundations. The government intensified its search as Escobar's power began to wane in the early years of the 1990s. Police and soldiers raided his properties, extensive warehouses, and thoroughly excavated the yards. In Hassan, the novelist, his large property, discover underground vaults. But despite the massive scale of these raids, only fragments of the hidden wealth have been brought to light. After Escobar was shot dead, his grieving widow and children were forced to flee to Argentina, claiming that they were left with absolutely nothing. His son, now known as Sebastian Marroquin, later wrote about his father's empire, but adamantly maintained that the family never saw any of the billions of dollars that were under Escobar's control. In 2016, Escobar's massive mansion in Miami captured the public's attention once more. When the brand-new owners, Christian de Bertier and Jennifer Vale, completely demolished the structure, construction workers discovered heavy concrete safes built into the foundations. One of the heavy safes mysteriously disappeared before it could even be examined, sparking widespread rumors of theft. Another safe was carefully transported under a heavy armed guard to a secure bank in Florida. Later on, a mysterious sealed metal cylinder was discovered hidden right under the kitchen stove, but it was completely and utterly empty. These searches attracted massive global international attention back in 2017 when the Discovery Channel first launched the hit show Finding Escobar's Millions. 2 highly experienced former CIA intelligence agents, Doug A. Laux and Ben Smith, meticulously searched across Colombia using drones, ground-penetrating radar, and metal detectors. They carefully examined various cartel properties and farmland, and even stumbled upon and opened a safe that ultimately contained nothing. The show revealed the evolution of Escobar's methods: secured, lead-lined storage vaults and safes hidden deep inside the thick walls and massive concrete-reinforced bunkers. The agents also carefully explored the deeply human side of the story. Posing undercover as filmmakers, they conducted extensive interviews with surviving cartel members and Escobar's immediate family members. His sister, Luz Maria, described her efforts to atone by leaving messages at the victims' graves. They also spoke with Juan Jairo Velasquez, who went by the nickname of Popeye, who openly confessed to personally ordering more than 3,000 different killings, and Juan Esteban, known as the Scorpion, who boldly claimed that truly staggering and astonishing amounts of money are still secretly hidden all throughout the city of Medellin. The searches were certainly not without their own significant risks. Douglo compared it to kicking a massive hornet's nest, pointing out that violence still surrounds Escobar's legacy even after all these years. The legend was reignited in 2020 when Escobar's nephew, Nicholas, claimed that he discovered a total of $18 million inside one of his uncle's former residences in Medellin. He said that a supernatural vision led him to the spot, where he uncovered bundles of cash wrapped in plastic, along with a gold pen, a typewriter, and a satellite phone. The vast majority of the cash had decayed to the point of being completely worthless and unusable because of the intense humidity. Nicholas admitted that he had actually stumbled upon several other hidden statues in the past, but he refused to share the details. Over the decades, Colombian newspapers have published photos of real discoveries. Back in 1989, they discovered $4 million hidden in barrels. Then, in 1990, Another $25 million worth of solid gold bars was found. By the year 2009, $10 million more was uncovered at the Hacienda Nápoles estate, along with countless other smaller finds discovered over the years. Officially, federal authorities have successfully managed to recover about $75 million, but lead investigators currently believe that at least 10 times that total amount may still be stashed away in secret accounts, slowly rotting in the cold ground or just waiting to be discovered. Some discoveries have sparked debates about ownership. In other cases, perfectly preserved bundles of cash were pulled out of weathered, rusty metal barrels, still intact after decades. A farmer in Antioquia uncovered barrels of dollars so well preserved that they looked like they had just been buried, igniting a fierce public debate over whether he should be rewarded or stripped of the discovery entirely. The world remembers the notorious drug kingpin Pablo Escobar for the billions he controlled. But after his death, remarkable discoveries buried in walls, fields, and foundations revealed shocking secrets that went far beyond the numbers. What exactly was uncovered? The darkest secrets. While he was still at the absolute height of his immense power, Pablo Escobar had already built a massive, invisible underground empire. His secret vaults were not just simple hiding places. They were engineered to safeguard money, weapons, and secrets, and in moments of crisis, even his own life. From the outside, Hacienda Nápoles looked like a luxury playground filled with exotic animals, swimming pools, and vast courtyards. However, beneath this display of luxury, there were secretly hidden rooms heavily reinforced with steel doors and underground concrete walls, effectively concealing the truth. The estate was as much a fortress as it was a symbol of wealth. The wraith on his properties in the early 1990s completely blindsided investigators found inside the vaults. They found crates of AK-47 rifles and hand grenades and thousands of rounds of ammunition. In some locations, heavy rocket launchers were stored alongside massive, overflowing piles of United States dollar bills. Each vault was essentially a war chest designed to protect Pablo Escobar's immense personal fortune, with the assurance that he could arm himself for a siege at any moment. But the money and weapons were merely one small piece of a much larger story. Investigators uncovered ledgers and records that proved to be far more incriminating and dangerous than firearms. These records meticulously documented the complex shipping schedules, encrypted financial transactions, an extensive list of bribes paid to politicians, police, and judges. In meticulous hand-rain, these extensive records mapped the global reach of the notorious Medellin cartel, from Colombia all the way to Miami, and even further across to Europe. For prosecutors, these ledgers were absolutely invaluable assets, providing a detailed and comprehensive roadmap of exactly how Escobar's empire operated. And what's truly terrifying is, the safes weren't the only thing Escobar dedicated a significant amount of his time to meticulously designing. Former criminal associates and local residents described soundproof, windowless rooms, equipped with heavy hooks and specialized drainage systems, which strongly suggested the existence of hidden torture or interrogation chambers. Although official investigators never formally documented the existence of such sites, but these stories are entirely consistent with Escobar's reputation for ruthless and violent intimidation tactics. In 1991, as he found himself facing increasingly intense pressure from both the Colombian government and the United States, Escobar negotiated a formal agreement to finally surrender. He could potentially face a maximum of 5 years in prison, but instead of entering a state-run facility, he actually built his very own private prison, La Catedral, on top of a mountain that overlooked the city of Medellin. To serve his sentence, Escobar chose his own guards, men who were loyal only to him, and filled the compound with luxuries. Men who were loyal only to him and filled the compound with luxuries. It included a soccer field, a bar, a jacuzzi, and a waterfall, and even a giant dollhouse, From this high balcony, it allowed Escobar to keep a constant watch over the city of Medellin while looking directly at his family's house as he spoke with them on the telephone. It quickly earned nicknames like Escobar's Hotel and the Medellin Country Club. However, behind this facade, the design served a deeper purpose: survival. Escape routes were built into its structure, with rumors of trap doors and tunnels. Its location on the mountaintop, which is often shrouded in evening fog, it is protected by the slopes. It made military attacks virtually impossible. Escobar even stored an arsenal inside the prison if necessary. For some time, this arrangement continued. Escobar continued to manage the cartel's operations from within. The government initially chose to tolerate these actions, but in 1992, disturbing reports began to emerge that he had personally ordered the torture and execution of 4 of his own men inside La Catedral. The scandal forced the authorities to take action, demanding his transfer to a regular prison. Escobar refused. In July, forces surrounded La Catedral, but when they entered, he had disappeared. Escobar escaped through a wall made of weak concrete, breaking through it and vanishing into the fog. His foresight in building escape routes once again revealed just how crucial hidden passages and thought-like systems were to his survival. After his escape, La Catedral was abandoned, and its legend was cemented. Years later, in 2007, the Benedictine monks converted the site into a monastery. Pilgrims still visit the site, walk in the same ground where Escobar once lived as both prisoner and king. Even after his death, the stories of the tunnels continued. A confidential informant working closely with the FBI claimed that Escobar had constructed elaborate underground vaults equipped with advanced air circulation, specifically designed to allow him to remain hidden deep underground for many days at a time. Colombian raids on various safe houses in Medellin uncovered partial tunnels and newly dug passageways, which served to further fuel and substantiate these sensational claims. These discoveries suggested that his obsession with secrecy went beyond just hiding money. He meticulously engineered elaborate escape systems specifically intended to ensure he remained one step ahead. However, that exact same way of thinking led him directly into the heart of his enemy's trap, the beginning of the end. The official American involvement in the intensive hunt for Pablo Escobar first began back in 1989, when President George Herbert Walker Bush authorized a covert mission known as the Operation Heavy Shadow. The goal of the operation was to help Colombia dismantle the Medellin cartel. In August, the United States military deployed the highly secretive Center Spike Unit, which was an elite Army signals intelligence group specializing in tracking high-profile fugitives by intercepting their radio and phone transmissions. They ultimately provided the critical intelligence that led directly to the killing of his powerful ally, José Rodríguez Gacha. However, despite years of surveillance, Escobar always managed to slip away, protected by loyalists within the Colombian police and military. By mid-1991, Pablo Escobar successfully secured a controversial and unprecedented deal with the Colombian government. Under the terms, he was allowed to retreat to his own luxurious private prison known as La Catedral. But when this arrangement finally collapsed on July 22, 1992, all of a sudden, Escobar became prey. In Maryland, U.S. Ambassador Morris Busby was suddenly jolted awake in the middle of the night by a pair of urgent telephone calls. The very first one finally brought him the news he had been waiting to hear for a very long time. President Cesar Gaviria had finally ordered Escobar to be moved from La Catedral. It was something Busby had been strongly urging for well over a year. Escobar had already successfully made his escape and vanished without a trace in Medellin with 9 of his men. At the presidential palace in Bogotá, Gaviria was furious when the reports confirmed the disaster. No raid had been carried out as he had ordered. Instead, the Deputy Minister of Justice and the Warden of La Catedral entered without permission and were taken hostage. The nation's credibility collapsed overnight, along with years of American pressure and hundreds of lives. For months, Gaviria had resisted deeper American intervention, but the humiliation changed his stance. He turned to Busby and sternly demanded full American support, solemnly vowing that Escobar would never see a legal courtroom or a prison cell ever again. As for Ambassador Busby, a former Navy officer and counterterrorism expert, this was the opportunity he had been waiting for. Busby knew that time was of the essence. If Escobar was given any room, he would rebuild his entire powerful empire in Medellin. He had to be tracked down and captured as quickly as possible while he was still exposed. Busby called in Major Steve Jacoby, the man who had been quietly and diligently working in Bogotá ever since 1989 with the specialized Centro Spike unit. Jacoby and his team had been listening to Escobar's calls for years. The highly refined Spanish seamlessly blended with English, as he ordered kidnappings and reorganized operations. All while he was busy sweet-talking his wife at the exact same time, Jacoby remained firmly convinced that he could successfully locate the elusive Escobar within just a matter of days. However, the real challenge they faced was whether the Colombian forces would be able to strike fast enough to catch him. Their raids were notoriously slow and deeply corrupt, and often leaked information directly to Escobar. Busby concluded that only one unit could successfully close this dangerous gap. Delta Force? America's most secretive counterterrorism team? Inside the steel vault at the embassy, Busby, Jacoby, and DEA Chief Joe Tai met to discuss their options with the CIA station chief, Bill Wagner. While Colombian law strictly prohibited the presence of foreign military troops, Busby argued that Delta Force could operate entirely undetected by being disguised as specialized trainers and advisors. There was a unanimous agreement that Escobar was never going to be taken alive. Prisons and trials had already proven to be ineffective. This time, the hunt would end in death. Washington responded quickly. President Blish, who was heavily invested in the war on cocaine, personally supported the plan. After consulting with General Powell, Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney ordered that Busby be given everything he needed. On July 26th, a specialized Delta Force team led by Colonel Jerry Boykin arrived in Bogotá while operating under deep civilian cover. Their days after Escobar's escape, he stepped back into the spotlight with an official statement to the members of the Colombian news media from a location in the Colombian jungle. The specific date was Thursday, July 24th, in the year 1992. The statement portrayed him as a betrayed man, forced to flee. He claimed that the government's betrayal left him no choice but to escape, and even proposed a new deal. He would return to prison if the United Nations guaranteed his safety. At the same time, the private phone calls between Pablo Escobar and his legal counsel were successfully intercepted by the specialized centrist Spike intelligence unit. Escobar accused the United States of interfering in Colombia's affairs and ordered his lawyer to pressure President Cesar Gaviria about the alleged American involvement. This was a calculated attempt to stir up resentment against both the government and Washington, but Gaviria remained firm. La Catedral was gone for good, and Escobar was once again a fugitive. The Centra Spike unit tracked his location to a wealthy suburb in Medellin, just a few miles from La Catedral, and for the first time, the Americans had both the tools and the political authority to act. By the time we reached the end of July in the year 1992, Colonel Hugo Martinez was chosen to lead the manhunt and personal danger. Martinez survived assassination attempts and bombs placed under his family's home, and even a $6 million bribe offered by a friend on Escobar's behalf. Returning from Madrid, Martinez rebuilt the Bloc de Busqueda unit into a force of 600 men, training soldiers and police to become a disciplined strike unit with a single mission: to take down Escobar. Unlike his arrogant predecessor Pinzón, Martinez demanded results. His methods were harsh, even brutal, but they worked. The Americans provided intelligence and technology. Martinez enforced discipline and fear, and for the first time, Escobar faced an enemy who couldn't be bribed, intimidated, or negotiated with. As expected, Escobar's response soon turned to violence, and he began attacking civilians. Despite spending billions and using advanced tracking tools, Escobar remained elusive. The centrist bike unit pinpointed his calls with precision. The Delta Force, or Blockade Buscata, raided hideouts with increasing speed. Still, Escobar adapted, escaping and responding with bombs and executions. When the search block took out Branson Tyson Muñez, Juana Escobar's most feared hitman, Escobar responded immediately, and 3 police officers lost their lives that same day. Funerals became routine, with widows fainting and officers being buried every week. The definitive turning point was the tragic library massacre. The resulting outrage compelled the government to declare Escobar the nation's public enemy #1. A reward of 5 billion pesos was offered, that is, approximately $6,500,000 to capture him. This was the most substantial bounty ever offered in Colombia. A powerful new paramilitary force soon emerged, known as Los Pepes. The name stood for people persecuted by Pablo Escobar. They systematically destroyed Escobar's various luxury estates, threatened his family, and left his associates completely lifeless with signs attached to their bodies. Unlike the state, Los Pepes offered no trials, no pleas, no mercy. Their campaign made it clear that anyone connected to Escobar would pay with their blood. For Martinez, who had hunted Escobar for nearly 4 years, and for the Americans who had relentlessly pursued him for 6 months, Los Pepes became an unofficial ally. Their campaign of threats destroyed Escobar's entire network. Publicly, the Americans condemned the violence. Privately, they recognized its effectiveness. For years, Escobar had been hiding behind lawyers, surrender deals, and political influence. Now, his greatest weapon, terror, was being used against him. The ultimate irony. By the time we reached early 1993, the hunt for Pablo Escobar had taken a brutal turn. At the search block headquarters in Medellin, Colonel Hugo Martinez kept a desk drawer full of photos of the deceased victims. When he showed this grim collection to a Delta Force member, he said plainly, "As long as I'm in command here, they won't live." They were often officially recorded as casualties in violent shootouts. Yet the photos told a completely different story. Clear gunshot wounds to the head, signs of execution rather than combat. Despite the raids, Escobar kept slipping away at the last moment. The elite operators of Delta Force bitterly nicknamed this specific area the final Maya Yard during their mission. Still, Martinez gradually earned a sense of respect. Prisoners who resisted interrogation rarely made it out alive, but those who cooperated were sent to prison for their crimes instead. His refusal to give in, combined with American technology, this made the search block an incredibly powerful and unyielding weapon. Both the Americans and Colombians knew they were engaged in a desperate race against their own government. Meanwhile, Attorney General Gustavo de Graaf was continuously and persistently pushing for surrender negotiations. This was the scenario that U.S. officials deeply concerned would lead to a repeat of the La Catedral disaster. Some of his men had already turned themselves in. On October 8th, his brother, Roberto Escobar, and the feared hitman Juan Popeye Velasquez surrendered and were sent to Itagüí prison in Medellin. Escobar himself showed no inclination to surrender. Instead, his lawyers continued to negotiate, which absolutely infuriated the brave individuals risking their lives to bring him down. The frustration kept growing. It reached the point where Colonel Gustavo Bermudez even told Colombian television that he would much rather see Escobar dead than captured. This bold statement provoked widespread outrage and a direct death threat from Escobar's teenage son. Bermudez later retracted his words, but he had already voiced what many were silently thinking. Meanwhile, Escobar's enemies multiplied. His execution of his old partners Fernando Galeano and William Moncada back in 1992 ignited a long and deadly vendetta. Their widows, Mary Galeano and Dolly Moncada, had the resources and knowledge of his network. Along with Diego Murillo, the man known as Don Berna, formed the core of Los Papas. This group recruited professional hitmen by making offers of 20 million Colombian pesos to each man. By October of 1992, Moncada's and Galeana's relatives were cooperating with investigators, providing intelligence that guided raids and assassinations. Escobar realized the danger, especially from Dolly Moncada. After her husband was killed, her house was looted, and anyone who might know her whereabouts was kidnapped. He even went so far as to offer a massive $3 million reward for her capture, dead or alive. By that time, however, she was already completely beyond the reach of his influence. During the month of August in 1992, United States federal agents moved her to Washington, D.C., the nation's capital. There, she began serving as a confidential informant for the DEA under the specific code name AA-92035. Her anger at Escobar fueled her cooperation. She provided comprehensive intelligence about his money, his properties, and his inner circle, whom she described as being even more dangerous than Escobar. She strongly pleaded with the authorities to completely seize and strip him of all his assets and target his family and associates, believing that this would effectively destabilize and weaken him. Her vendetta deepened after her younger brother was kidnapped and killed. This contributed to the increasingly harsh tone of the campaign against Escobar. Other former allies also turned against him. Carlos later attributed to the increasingly harsh tone of the campaign against Escobar, other former allies also turned against him. Carlos later, Escobar's once boastful partner, was in an American prison seeking leniency. In a very lengthy and detailed letter sent directly to the DEA, he described Escobar's movements between safe houses near Medellin, his reliance on mobile phone networks, his bodyguards, his escape routes, and even his physical weakness. Overweight, out of shape, and unable to run for more than a few minutes. Fidel Castaño also defected, a paramilitary leader and former partner, after Escobar killed his friends. He began supplying information to Colombian and American forces. During one of the raids, DEA agent Javier Peña noticed that Carlos Castaño actually joined the search block members out in the field while desperately trying to save a drowning officer. His betrayal added another layer of pressure. By the closing months of 1993, the highly specialized Centra Spike Unit, which served as the U.S. Army's Secret Signals Intelligence Unit, had successfully mastered the complex art of tracking Pablo Escobar's frequent cellular phone transmissions. Despite fully knowing the risks, he simply couldn't resist calling his family, who were scattered across various countries and under constant, relentless harassment. On December 2nd, on the very day following his 44th birthday, Escobar called his son Juan Pablo and spoke for an unusually long time. This was the critical mistake that the team at Centerspike had been patiently waiting for. Within hours, Colonel Martinez's men were gathering in the Los Olivos neighborhood of Medellin. Inside a modest row house, Escobar and his loyal driver, Alvaro de Jesus Agudelo, nicknamed El Lamón, were waiting in plain sight. He was firmly convinced that no one would ever think to search so close to the house. But a sharp-eyed policeman suddenly caught sight of a long-haired, bearded man in the second-story window. He looked significantly older and heavier than Escobar's old photos, but the hunters knew they had finally found him. The attack was swift. Suddenly, El Lamón went first, crashing violently through a window onto the lower roof, and ran away. A burst of gunfire brought him down. Escobar followed, armed with 2 pistols, including the Sig Sauer, which he had once handed over at La Catedral. He climbed across the rooftops, would turn fire, but 3 separate bullets actually hit him, one in the leg and another one right in the lower back and another fatal shot through the ear. Only a few short minutes later, he lay motionless and lifeless next to his bodyguard. The question of who fired the fatal shot sparked immediate controversy. Search Unit Officer Hugo Aguilar personally claimed the credit for the kill. However, Don Berna insisted it was actually his own brother who did it. Meanwhile, many conspiracy theorists argued it was really American agents who pulled the trigger that day. No definitive witness ever came forward. The terrified neighbors had hidden themselves deep inside their homes, and the very first photos, which were taken by DEA agent Steve Murphy, only came after Escobar was already lying there lifeless. The scene quickly turned into chaos as police, journalists, and onlookers flooded into the house. The official autopsy report listed a gunshot to the head as the cause of death, but it sparked a series of complex new questions when his body was exhumed in 2006 to conduct a highly publicized paternity test. Unfortunately, no conclusive new answers emerged from that process. In 2020, advanced forensic scientific tests recreated the wounds using ballistic gel. This evidence strongly supports a theory long proposed by journalist Mark Bowden. The fatal shot to the head came from a 9mm handgun, which was almost certainly fired from close range, rather than from a long-range rifle. The wound showed no clear signs of gunpowder residue. This strongly suggests that the barrel of the gun may have been pressed firmly and directly against his head, or that the residue simply wasn't recorded. Some investigators saw this as evidence of suicide, vividly remembering Escobar's solemn promise that he would never be captured alive. Others suspected it was a coup de grace fired by one of his pursuers. The official coroner's report, which was oddly accompanied by a press release, went to great lengths to deny suicide, only served to raise further suspicions rather than actually resolving them. Despite the uncertainty, one undeniable fact still remained. Escobar's notorious reign finally came to an end that day. His body was photographed after being brought down from the rooftop with a sense of grim and somber satisfaction by the search block. For a great many people across Colombia, it was freedom after years of terror, while for many other people it quite simply meant that one kind of violence had been substituted and replaced by another, as Los Pepes continued their campaign with the state's tacit approval. To the world, the image of Escobar's corpse in Medellin was the body of a man who had been hunted down, betrayed, and brought down in the very city that once worshipped him. So, what did you think of this episode? If you like, I recommend you watch this episode right here because it's really important.